Welcome to Pink Caddy Garage. We're going to flush the brake fluid on this Mercedes GLS 450 as part of our B service. It's a pretty simple job, easy to do, so follow along and I'll show you how it's done. On the driver's side, back by the windshield, you're going to want to pull this plastic cover off here from the front, tilt up, and then slide it out. You're disengaging these tabs right here across the top. Set that off to the side. And then to bring things in a little closer here, once that panel is off, this is our brake fluid reservoir. So you're going to want to just keep an eye on that as we're doing our flush so that we keep it. This is the maximum level. We want to keep it up here where we can see it. We certainly don't want to run it dry and introduce air into the system. Today, instead of using a hand pump, we're going to be using this pneumatic brake bleeding system that you just hook up right here to your air compressor. And this hose goes to a fitting that you're going to be put on your bleeders. It just makes the job go a lot quicker that way. First, we're going to suction out the brake fluid that's in the master cylinder. You just want to pull out your little strainer here so you can get your hose in. Want to be sure and protect your fender and paint because this brake fluid will ruin it. And just go in. You can see that fluid is pretty brown looking. Should be almost clear. Once you have that done, you can put your strainer back in and get your brake fluid. Be sure you use the right type of brake fluid for your application. Fill your reservoir back up. That's great. That just took all the brake fluid. I'll have to go buy some more.
You look at the fluid that we pulled out of that master cylinder. You can see it's pretty dark and contaminated looking. So we'll go back to our back brakes and start there.
You're usually going to want to start with the brake furthest away from the master cylinder, which is actually going to be the rear brake on the right side of the car, which we already did, but it's so sunny over there, it's better to film on this side. You don't have to take your tire off, but it makes it way easier. Just get to your brake caliper. You'll see a little rubber cap here over the bleeder nipple. So we're going to get an 11mm socket and just loosen that up slightly and put our bleeder tool on. On the end of our bleeder hose, we've just got this little rubber tip device that is going to slip on over our end of our bleeder there. And then we are going to pull a vacuum on it by locking this handle down. And then we're going to turn the bleeder just a little bit. See if we can get some flow. Yep, it's starting to go. I'll do a little more. And while you're doing this, you're going to want to monitor your master cylinder to make sure your fluid level doesn't get too low. Well, that's been pulling for about 3 minutes and it has gone from completely full to just about halfway full. You can't always tell if it's changing color looking at the bleeding tool, so you sometimes just have to go with volume, but that much will ensure that you have cleared out that particular brake line. Once you've finished with a particular caliper, you can then tighten up that bleeder. Stop the airflow. Don't forget to replace the little rubber tip. We're on our last one now, which is going to be the driver front. And just want to show you what this one looks like. You're going to find the bleeder on top of the caliper there. Go ahead and get an 11mm on there. Break it loose so you can get a wrench. Put your bleeder on. Just be sure it's snugly on there. And start the suction. You can see, I think, got some brown fluid going there. Reservoir looking pretty dirty, which is a good thing because we're changing it. And just keep an eye on that fluid. You can see right here what color the fluid's supposed to be. Just keep that topped off. We'll let that go for about a minute. These front brakes have much shorter brake lines, of course, than the rears do because they're so close to the master cylinder. And we'll get this thing put back together. Now, flushing that brake fluid is part of your B service. It's supposed to be done about every 20,000 miles. We're going to go ahead and get these tires rotated front to back. Hopefully make them last a little longer. And then this is our brake pad, and this is the part that wears, and as you can see, hopefully, that looks really good. What we can't see too well with the camera, but I can get in there with a tool, the backside doesn't look nearly as good. So I'm glad we checked it. It's always good to do a visual inspection of your pads. They don't always wear the same rate. So it looks like we're going to be doing rear pads at least pretty soon. Checking our front brake pads. Again, really easy to see this one. It's probably got about 50 to 60% life left on it. So we don't need to worry about that for a little while. Can't really see the back with the camera. It does look a little bit thinner. So we're probably going to do all four of these at the same time. Just as a side note, these tires are supposed to be rotated every oil change, and when I took it to the dealer about 11 months ago, they were supposed to do that. But these rims were literally rusted on to this rotor right here. Nothing's been put on. It doesn't look like it's ever been cleaned. So I'm pretty sure these tires have never been rotated. So if your rotors have this really rough looking rust, just get a wire brush or a little bit of sandpaper and clean it off before you put it back on. I've got most of that surface rust knocked off. You just wipe that down, put a thin layer of, I'm using white lithium grease, but some kind of lubricant, just so there's something there in between that aluminum wheel and this iron rotor to help it not corrode like that. Compare the new to the old brake fluid right quick, and you can see why it's important to change it. On the left, we've got the way it's supposed to look. And on the right, that is what it looks like after a few years, maybe more, of absorbing water and contaminants and things like this. So whether you fix it yourself or not, it's important that you keep up with your brake fluid. Tools and parts needed for this job. Of course, we've got our jack and jack stands to get the car up in the air if you do want to take the tires off. So this brake bleeding tool is about $70 on Amazon. You can get a $20 one at Harbor Freight or somewhere like that that's a hand pump. I used a breakover bar to get those lug nuts loose, and then I used an 11mm socket to get the bleeders loose, and then the wrench to tighten them and loosen them during the actual bleeding. And then get some, if you've got a Mercedes or whatever European car, get the correct brake fluid. This took 24 ounces. Half of it went into the master cylinder originally, and the other 12 ounces went in through the lines. So the question is this worth fixing this yourself? I think it is, but it depends. What tools do you already have, and how many vehicles do you need to maintain? Dealer charges about $100 to $150 to do a brake fluid flush, and we did it for basically 24 ounces of brake fluid and about 45 minutes. The total cost was $17 for the fluid, but do you have tools? So if you have a brake bleeder that you can hook up to an air compressor, that's great. That's the fastest way. You could also pretty easily do this with one of the little hand pumps that costs about $20 to $30 from the tool store. You'll have the tools after that, so you won't need to purchase those every time. So going forward, once you have the tools, you will be able to do a really inexpensive brake fluid flush, and it's important to do. Thanks for watching.